Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey Podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always. You hear how exasperating all of this is, Jason? It's just he's here again. It's Jason Johnston yelling. It's like he's inescapable. Inescapable.
I'm so glad we both feel the same way.
The thing is,
this fucking guy again.
I don't want to escape you though, Jason.
I don't think I've ever sworn this early in an episode. It's the end of 2021. You're gonna get the early swears.
Oh wow! You know, for a Scotsman, I'm surprised.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Joshua Hatton, Jason Johnston yelling. Let me ask you a question.
Okay. When
was the last time you saw Sister Act 2?
Wow. That, in my list of what could Jason possibly ask me next when the last time I saw Sister Act 2 was not among the questions. And so... But in my defense, given how poorly the Raymond Carver-John Cheever conversation went before we hit record, I thought going whoopee was a little safer. So what you're saying is Sister Act 1 is more like the Cheever, and Sister Act 2 is what's the other guy? Chivas Regal? What's his name? Chiver? Chives.
Yeah, I would definitely not compare the work of American genius Raymond Carver to Sister Act 2. Sister Act 1 was all right. It was more than I thought it could be.
Yeah.
Sister Act 2. So answer the question. Answer the question.
I will answer the question.
When did you last see Sister Act 2?
I'm going to answer it in a very slightly circuitous manner. I first saw Sister Act 1 sometime during the pandemic.
Interesting.
There were so many people, that movie, and what's the other one with Ralph Macchio and the guy from the Munsters and Marissa Tomei?
Sister Act 2.
No. No, the one with the youths. Joe Pesci was in it.
My Cousin
Vinny. So Sister Act and My Cousin Vinny and probably My Big Fat Greek Wedding all are within this, and like I said, I'm going to answer your question, all fit within this silo of movies that people cannot say enough good things about and always suggest that I watch them, but when I do, I'm severely disappointed. And so actually the first one that people had suggested over and over and over and over again was National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Boy, did I hate that. Boy, did I think that was a steaming pile. Compared to the first, European Vacation,
Yeah.
So when that and to this day, right? You're not on Facebook, I am. And so I see people, with these Facebook posts saying, if you can't quote X number of things from this movie, then you should unfriend me, and this is the best movie ever. And I didn't dislike it because I don't celebrate Christmas. I just didn't like it because the humor didn't hit me the way it hit everybody else. So, to really answer your question, Sister Act was in that silo of everybody said you should watch it, and I was hesitant because of that experience with Christmas Vacation. And when I watched it, I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it. At a scale from 1 to 10, I'd give it a 7.3. It was a lot of fun, incredibly predictable, but fun as hell.
And a 1990s musical comedy with Whoopi Goldberg was predictable, you say? Get out of town.
And it was good enough for me to say, you know what? Maybe I should watch the second one, knowing that the second one would likely be a lesser film than the first. So I still haven't seen it, but I'm open to seeing it.
interestingly, and I was really quite stunned when you said a moment ago that you saw the first one during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I really thought you would have been an at the cinema kind of kid, because I know how
love
much
Whoopi.
you love going to the cinema.
I love the cinema, and I
love
love
Whoopi.
Whoopi. Yeah.
Right? So I really thought you'd have seen Sister Act way back at its release. I'm quite shocked that it's a pandemic view for you. You'll be less shocked to know that I saw Sister Act for the very first time this December, this month.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Actually 1 week ago, right? I knew you wouldn't be surprised. and I expected it to be not very good, and it was pretty good. But the boys had said, my two boys had said, next week, can we watch Sister Act 2? They do not like sequels. They do not watch sequels. They dismiss sequels as the cash grab that they often are.
Interesting.
And they requested to see Sister Act 2, which I was very surprised. So we actually watched it last night, our Saturday pizza and movie night that we do on a weekly basis. Sister Act 2 was already decided, which in itself is a wonderful thing. One of the things I hate about pizza and movie night is the squabble over which movie are we going to watch.
Yeah.
Who gets to select? Who selected last time? What did mum and dad want to watch? It's all so much bullshit on a weekend when I should just be drinking. And so we go into the weekend knowing it's Sister Act 2, hit play on it. First half of it is like a 1990s after school special, which our American friends will know exactly what I'm alluding to. It's
bad
it's
news.
heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Heavy-handed. The nuns in the choir aren't nearly as endearing as they were in the first movie. It's pretty hard going. The ending, you already know it. Yeah, at this point, you understand what the ending is going to be about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the movie, because I think the writers didn't know what the ending was going to be when they started writing it. I think they found the ending about halfway to 3/4 of the way through as well. But I tell you what, it was an easy watch. It was fun in parts, and it filled up an hour and 42 minutes of my life while I drank.
You may remember, you actually, wow, maybe you definitely remember. I remember back in late 2010, early 2011, when we were looking to launch this company. And you'd said to me, if I ever come to you and say a good thing about Sister Act 2, know that it's a cry for help.
I was blinking while I was telling you as well, if you'll notice.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with mindless film watching with the family. Like, a movie doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It could just be a good bit of fun, even if you know what's going to happen. You're having fun, right? And I'm going to tie it to whiskey here, right? People always ask us, should I put ice in the whiskey? Should I not put ice in the whiskey? Should I add a couple of drops? Is it okay if I add a little soda? Can I do this with Coke? And in the end, you say, did you buy the bottle with your money? Yes, I did. It's your whiskey. You can enjoy it however you like. It's your prerogative.
It's true.
So there's nothing wrong with that. So I feel as if Sister Act 2 may be just like a easy space cider, maybe with a little bit of ginger ale going on. And you're like, yeah, you know what? It's all right.
Are you ready for my bombshell?
Oh, shit. Go ahead.
You know what's in production right now?
Sister Act 3, the Holy Trinity.
You're exactly correct.
Are you kidding me?
There's a third. There's going to be a third Sister Act. They're talking about it being released exclusively to Disney+.
Oh my gosh. Come on, Whoopi. You have the View money. You don't need any more nun money.
I can imagine they backed up the money truck for Sister Act 3
I'm
being
sure
an
they
exclusive to Disney Plus.
Oh my gosh.
I don't hold a grudge against her for saying yes to Sister Act 3 at all. And guess what? The Johnston Yellen family will be watching it upon release.
Wow. Are they
Blink,
gonna? Are they
blink,
gonna?
blink, 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 blink.
Are they gonna keep the GIMP scene? Do you think for Disney Plus?
I don't know. I know they asked the question about Zed and whether Zed was dead or not. I know that much.
Zed is dead, and he's gone to heaven now. Do 3 Hail Marys and call me in the morning. I think that's how you do it.
That is how Hail Marys work. You're exactly correct.
So, speaking of,
here we are.
Yes, yeah. Here we
Speaking of tenuous connections,
are. Is there
here
a
comes
tenuous
one.
Sort of. I mean, I guess you could tie Mary to Jesus, and Jesus was in Jerusalem at one time.
Look at you, pro move, pro move.
Listen.
Talking about Jerusalem. Let me tell you about Tel Aviv.
For the first time since, literally for the first time since March of 2020, specifically March of 2020, I welcomed an Impex supplier to the States. Now, in March 2020, I had David Cover of Pendarren with me, and we were in Chicago and, just sort of bopping around the Midwest. And if I'm not mistaken, we actually posted an episode from that trip. So I know there is an episode with David. It may have been that one. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
But just not in the car.
It wasn't a car one. No. I don't think it was.
I was thinking there was a car
it was a car one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a car one. Yeah.
I thought there was a car one beyond the one we did with Ollie.
Yeah. And I did a car one with James Wills as well.
Oh.
Yep. And speaking of, I had in my car, I welcomed to my car Tal Chotiner and Tomer Goren of M&H Distillery. They flew in from Israel, triple vaccinated. As soon as our great nation would allow vaccinated travelers in, they came in, and I had them for a week. We talked about it a little bit in a previous episode when I was talking about the Kosher Fest event and that guy who came to our table saying, "You put cognac in a barrel, it's whiskey. You put vodka in a barrel, it's rye whiskey."
There's been some wild feedback from that part of the last episode. Like, people just eyes like saucers in hearing that. Like, he said what?
He said what?
What? He was fighting someone up? What? It was mental. Absolutely. That really resonated. That was a great story.
It was something else. So I got to spend a week with them, and the first part of it was New York, New Jersey, and then we had to travel to upstate New York, and then we were in and around upstate New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And during our trip from Massachusetts back down to Connecticut, I broke out our recording equipment and had a conversation with these guys, which kind of seemed like an anachronism. And by that I mean the conversation overall, which you'll hear, we really go into the launch of the brand and the creation of Classic, and then the 3 Elements range, and then their Apex series. And it's really talking about the launch. But the thing is, the launch happened a year ago. Right? I as an employee of Impex, and as someone who works with the entire Impex sales team, we've been selling M&H Classic and Elements and Apex for a while now. It almost feels a bit old hat. And so as we're talking about this, we're talking about it in such a way that a new launch when it isn't. It just so happened to be that they couldn't come into the States for us to have this conversation. They couldn't go around the world to have this conversation with people. So while it does feel anachronistic by a year, it was nice to have this conversation because, you know, you're hearing about the creation of these whiskeys from the horses' mouths and in a really cool way. I thought it was really interesting hearing their approach to making the whiskeys, hearing how they had to deal with COVID when they wanted to launch. You know, there's a lot going on in this conversation, but I think overall it kind of focuses on the creation of their range, which we don't normally focus on. You know, we're
Correct.
really,
I was just thinking that as you were describing this. Yep.
right, but because we, you know, anytime we interview someone, it's not to say, "Hey, here's a platform to sell your whiskeys." That's not it.
Correct.
However, this is not the first time, but one of the few times where we're talking to a distillery that had just launched it. And what do they have to talk about? Exactly this, right? This is the story that they're trying to tell. And so I didn't want to derail them from that in any way.
But I also think as an industry podcast, we have conversations about getting labels approved by the TTB.
Yeah.
We've had conversations about logistics and what it means to be unable to get your hands on glass right now, or what it means to get your, you know, difficulties with getting your product moved around the world right now. To talk about the launch of a new series or a range in time of COVID, yeah, why would you not discuss that with them? I think it's absolutely spot on.
Good.
So I got no qualms about the topic, none at all.
Good. I'm glad you felt that way, and that was the spirit going into it. But I wanted to make it clear to you. I wanted to make it clear to the listeners. You know, yes, I may be an employee of Impex Beverages, but this is, you know, we're not just giving them a platform to sell their product. We're giving them a platform to talk about their product, right? And
yeah, I am curious, was there any rain while you were on the road?
There was. Oh my gosh! At one point,
there's always rain when we do these.
At one point, it was pissing down.
Oh my goodness! I remember that from David Cover.
Yeah, it was harsh, and you know, it's funny. They were just talking, and I think it gets mentioned in the podcast. You know, November is when winter starts in Israel. In what's winter in Israel? You're not really getting a lot of snow except up, you know, in the upper Galilee, but it really is the start of the colder weather and the rainy season. And it was in the 90s Fahrenheit, right? So in the 30s Celsius and dry. And it's just, they kept on saying, unlike Game of Thrones, winter is not coming, not to Israel.
Ever since you've said Upper Galilee, I just think of that being the gentrified area of Galilee.
Like that. Everybody has an underbite and went to Harvard.
Oh, man. All right. Should we hop over, give this a listen, share it with the listeners?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll come back, and then we have a little bit of a treat for our listeners afterwards, something that we've wanted to do on wax, which I'm really excited to do with you, which can be taken in a series of ways, but not in the way you're thinking.
It certainly can. God. What have I signed up to? Anywho.
Look at that. We're officially recording, gentlemen. Can you believe that?
We do? Okay. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Not bad. I've been traveling America for the East Coast for the last 6 days or something like that, while Tomer was asleep. Are you awake, Tomer?
What? What? yeah. I'm awake.
So I've got the wonderful two of my. I call them secretly. I haven't told them this, but I've been in my mind calling Tal and Tomer TNT.
Yeah.
Like dynamite. TNT. So Tal and Tomer from Milk and Honey again. Last time I was with you, at least. No, this is true. Last time I was with you was in Tel Aviv.
In Tel Aviv, yeah.
It was on your home turf. And now I have you in my home turf of beautiful, rainy, cold Connecticut.
Yeah, it's not that cold. It's the worst winter for us probably, but there's no winter in Israel this year. So we actually missed some rain, some cold weather, and some fresh air and gray sky. We really liked it.
Yeah.
It's 30 degrees in Tel Aviv Celsius today, and it's November.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I could not handle that. Well, I could, and I have done.
Short time.
But that was in June, not in November.
Yeah.
So when I was with you both last, it was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there was no COVID. There were no travel restrictions, but there was also no whiskey from you guys. It was all less than 3 years old.
Actually, yeah, we had only young single malts since then.
Yeah.
At the beginning of 2020, we just launched our classic whiskey, the first commercial whiskey. And then the world shut down.
Yeah.
So tell me what that's like, finally having a product to sell and basically changing your model on how to sell that whiskey. What was that like and what was that like?
I think that there is two things. First of all, we finally had whiskey, so we were going to be judged by our whiskey, by our quality, and not by the gimmick that you find a 5 months or a 1 year old spirit very, very old, like, because of our climate. So, but
which was nice.
It was great, but then we lost our gimmick edge, and now we just have whiskey, and we have to be very good for that. Mm-hmm. So we launched our whiskey at the beginning of 2020, like Tomer said. We had few launchings. Just think about that if you are a car manufacturer and you finally producing your first car and then no one can buy it, or you can never promote it or go and show people how your car is. Your whole company life is going to focusing on the point where you're finally going to have a product, finally going to have a whiskey, and then we couldn't do anything. So it was very hard, but I think as we think very fast, so I think we were the first one to ship all over the world all kinds of miniatures and tasting kits, and we adopted the Zoom way of life, which is probably much more tiring than to go all day long. Do 1 or 2 hours of Zoom, or do 6 masterclasses back to back. I think Zoom is more exhausting.
It is exhausting. There's no doubt about it. We've talked about it. Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue. So yeah, I think we had whiskey, and we needed to be very, very innovative and very, very fast. So because we're not a big company with huge marketing budget. For us, it's boots on the ground, travel, and put liquid on lips. It was very hard, but I think that we were very innovative with the Zoom and very, making a little bit of buzz all the time. I think that what helped us was the Whiskey Advocate magazine picked our whiskey to be one of the world best 20, and our classic, and it was making another buzz, so we could open some new markets. I think we opened around 15 markets via Zoom without meeting the people.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There's other things that I want to talk about, but if we could stay on this for a little bit, do you feel as if that is just now part of your business moving forward? Fast forward 5 years from now, and there's hopefully no COVID 5 years from now, but is this a new way to do more business without traveling so much, or or do you think you'll get back to the travel because you need to be doing that?
Hopefully not. Hopefully it's not going to be like that. Yes, Tomer.
I don't think we will give away travels, past traveling, and we will continue to travel. But also, I think it's a new tool that we discovered. I think everyone discovered it, and it won't gonna disappear.
It's like what we're doing now. We're going to retailers, to wholesalers, meeting distributors. This is something you don't do on Zoom.
Yeah.
What you do on Zoom, it's when your products are deployed in the market, so you go to the end consumer, because sometimes it's like going into whiskey shows and have a lot of people trying your stuff. But business to business, it's really hard to do that on Zoom, because I think nothing beats traveling, but
Yeah.
I think an added tool that all of us in the whiskey business will adopt.
Sure. So it's 2020, and you've launched Classic. That's one product. That's hard enough.
Yeah.
Then you launched the Element series.
Then bam, the elements.
The what?
It was a boom, big boom.
Okay. We launched one element, the sherry one first, and then other two during same year, and then even one of the Apex series, the small batch series, and it was all while we can't travel. But you don't think about that, because you have your everyday struggle with the kids are in school or not in school. You're not regulations or restrictions are easing off, or another lockdown, and in Israel everything works very fast. I think we are the first one to get the first, the second, and even the third booster. We actually launched at the same year 5 whiskeys, which was crazy.
Is launching 5 whiskeys during a year of COVID the same as launching 1 whiskey in a year of COVID, or were there extra challenges to do that?
I think both, because first of all, when you have only 1 whiskey and you want to launch it, and you can't travel and let people taste and give them some cask samples, so you have enough content for a mini masterclass or just for tasting. With 1 whiskey, it's really hard to do a proper, let's say, a masterclass via Zoom. But when we do have 4 of them, I'm not talking now about the Apex because it came later and it's different, but 4 of them, the core range, the Classic and 3 elements, I think we had a package already, and it was easier to ship more pallets, because every less products you ship, it's the cost of the shipping is higher per bottle. But the information, the launching of every one of those was very hard to begin with in the COVID time, but again, it was another excuse to talk to your customers and to get them going, to get them interested in another thing. And of course, it's amazing. This year, finally, when we are standing in a whiskey show, all of a sudden, 2 years ago, people saw us with young single malt, maybe a few cask samples, and now we're standing with, like in Paris, with 7 whiskeys.
Amazing. That's just amazing. So, I imagine there's a good number of our listeners who of course, heard of Milk and Honey, may not have had a chance to taste it, because this is actually to a point you had made when we were just visiting our friend Sean at a retail shop we were just at, where during COVID, people are going for the familiar bottle, not necessarily going for the new bottle. And so, Tomer, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you constructed Classic, and then you added on these 3 elements, and what the goal is for these different whiskeys. For those listening at home that haven't had the chance to taste the whiskeys, how did you construct them, and what should people be expecting from this range?
All right, so first we wanted the first 4 expressions from Milk and Honey, which is the Classic, and the 3 expressions from the Element, to describe really well who Milk and Honey is, and to showcase the distillery character. So the basics here is to work with the casks and not let them overpower on the distillery character. And it's quite hard in the hot climate whiskey maturation. So what we try to do with the classic first is to make a well balanced, well drinkable whiskey that showcase the fruitiness of the new make, the distillery character, but also the rapid maturation, the cask flavors, and to mix them together. That's the classic. But it's all about balancing things, not letting it over mature, over age. Then the elements, we add another cask to each one of them. So again, we have red wine cask, we have sherry cask, and we have peated. The red wine cask, to be honest, I usually don't like whiskeys matured in red wine cask. So here we try to balance things and to build the extra flavors from the red wine cask on the ex-bourbon vanilla flavors, sweet flavors. So it's not too winey. It's just the whiskey I think winey whiskey should be.
Yeah.
And again, with the sherry, it's not sherry bomb, of course. It's well balanced, well blended, should I say?
Yeah. Because just so our listeners know here, what you're doing with the Element series is you're taking the classic recipe, the ex-bourbon, the XSTR, and that's basically 50% of the marriage of casks, and then you add in the red wine as an element. You add in the sherry as an element, and I, me as a whiskey drinker, and Jason and I talk about this all the time, is we love our whiskeys and we love our sherried whiskeys and we love our, big cask influence flavors, but sometimes that overtakes the distillery character, and sometimes it can be fun, but it can throw things a bit out of balance. And it sounds as if that's the number one thing you're trying to avoid, is releasing a whiskey that is too much of one thing or too much of another thing.
Well, we will have those whiskies also hiding or covering the distillery character. But here we wanted first to maintain the distillery character inside the 4 bottles, but second to build a range of whiskies that anyone can choose at least one whiskey from. So we have 4 different flavors, different tastes, and I think we see it in masterclass in travels around the world that there isn't one whiskey that bolts out or is the best seller. Let's say like this.
I can add, and I think that here, just with this market tour that we just in the middle of, we saw that people can recognize the house style, Tomer's hand, and our distillery character through all of those different kind of whiskeys. And there's yesterday we had a masterclass. Someone told me before he tasted, I don't like sherry whiskeys, and then he said, okay, it's a very good whiskey because it's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with peat. Of course, if you're from Ireland, you do peated whiskeys. This is your house character. But sometimes for us, the smoke is and the earthiness kind of overwhelms, and you don't feel the rest of the distillery character. If I'm looking at Kilchoman, it's amazing. It's very smoky whiskeys, but you can see the distillery character, and you know it's a Kilchoman. And this is what we wanted to do with the core range. So, of course, our peated one, and Tomer's going to talk about that. It's not a very peated whiskey. Sometimes you cannot smell the peat inside, but when you taste it, you see it's maybe a very gentle one. And if you don't like peated whiskeys, this is probably the whiskey for you.
Yeah. Yep.
So the peated one?
Yeah.
I barely can hear you. So.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, we're driving and it's raining, and I think it's the next Netflix. We talked about it. Distillers drinking whiskey in cars, having fun.
Yeah, distillers drinking drams in cars.
All right. So
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
first, we talked about the wine, red wine element. Now, the sherry one. So it's not a sherry bomb, of course.
Hold on, just to be clear,
Yeah.
we are not drinking drams in
No, yeah,
cars.
yeah, of course.
No.
This is hashtag please drink responsibly. Hashtag we're just driving to our next meeting.
Just had coffee. Just had coffee. That's it.
Sorry, go on, Tomer.
No, that's important. So the sherry one, it's built on, of course, ex-bourbon and STR cask, which we use for all the 4 core range whiskies. About 50% of those casks. Then we add really special casks of PX and Sherry Oloroso that we season in our very own seasoning project of casks in Jerez. The thing is that we are kosher. It's an additional value for us, and we wanted to use sherry cask, but we couldn't source any kosher sherry cask because there is no. So we had to start our own seasoning project in south of Spain, where we bring the rabbi to produce the sherry wine for us, and then we season the cask for 1 year and send them over to Israel to use them in our whiskey. So again, it's only around 50%. It's changed from batch to batch because we want to keep the consistency. But we use only 50% sherry in this element sherry. So it's sherried whiskey, but not sherry bob, of course.
And the 2 types of sherry are actually working great together. One the Oloroso gives you a characteristics and a creaminess, and of course the Pedro Jimenez, the PX, is giving you the dark chocolate, some fruitiness, but again, just perfectly balanced.
And you're using the combination of hogsheads and sherry butts.
Yes, at the beginning we started with using a combination of hogsheads 250 liters and sherry butts 500 liters. But right now the next batch of cask for us will be only hogsheads because first it's hard to deal. We don't have a lot of space for casks at the distillery, and the sherry butts are really hard to deal with. But second, we do want the flavors, as we use the sherry cask as a component inside the blend. So we do want the sherry flavors to be very strong, very intense, and then we add it in the proper amount, in the amount we think it should be inside the blend.
Do you so you're not only working with the rabbi and the sherry producer in Jerez, but you're also working with a cooper as well to produce the hogsheads.
Well, yes, to be honest, the one who started all this and put all this triangle together was the representative from the cooperage in south of Spain. So he's the glue who stuck all things together. Then
the Dutch guy. The Dutch guy, Hank. Yeah,
Hank.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
So they are organizing everything. Of course, we are coming to Spain twice a year to check the cask, just to taste the wine, to see the flavors, to see how the cask develops.
Yeah.
And then he's doing everything. He's organizing everything in this project.
So, do you specify a kind of wood? Are you going with American white oak? Are you looking for European oak or Spanish oak?
So far we used only American oak in those sherry casks. Next year we will have a bunch of French oak also and Spanish oak.
I'm just curious, for not just for our listeners but for me as well. What do you think the different oaks may do for flavor?
Well, it's gonna change the oxidation. It's gonna change the flavors from the oak itself, and it's gonna change the evaporation rate, which is very important in Israel because every oak has different. How do you say that?
Density. It's the density.
Yes.
Oh, like a thickness.
Yeah, thickness.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
the thickness. It's the density.
Oh, the density. Yeah, the density.
Sorry for my English.
Yes, certain oaks being porous and some being very tight.
So it's gonna
the Americans
change.
are very porous, and the European one, like the cognac casks, for an example, or just French oak, are much more
Tight.
tight.
Okay. Yeah. Got
So
it.
it's going to change the evaporation rate, the angel share, of course. It's going to change the oxidation during the maturation in hot climate, and I think it's going to be very different. And we'll check if we like it.
Okay.
And the last element is the pitted one,
Yes.
and here we use a combination of ex-Isla casks and ex-Isla cask with unpitted barley, and an ex-bourbon cask with our own pitted barley, which we source from Czech Republic. So every peat flavor, pit style is different, and the combination of those two peats is really interesting, make it more complex, more interesting, and yet very balanced because we used it over the ex-bourbon and SDR casks.
Is there, and I apologize because we may have discussed this the last time we spoke, and so if this is a repeat answer, well, hopefully, like me, you will have forgotten that I've asked this question. You'll have forgotten that you've answered it, while our listeners have to suffer the question and the answer yet again. But is there a reason that you went with Czech peated barley as opposed to UK peated barley, or Scottish peated barley, I should say? And do you plan on using some Scottish peated barley? Do you want to stick with?
Yeah. So as almost everything at the distillery, every decision that we made at the beginning, we used several kind of peat, and the one that we liked the most was this Czech Republic malt, Czech Republic peated malt. But now we are trying to change it or to add another peat style to our portfolio. So we started using also peat from the UK.
Okay.
And then we'll see how it develops and how it's going, if we like it or not, and we'll decide whether to replace the Czech Republic malt or to just add several mashes of this UK malt.
Okay, good. So that's our baseline. That's your core range of whiskeys.
Yes. Then, well, I'm a whiskey geek, so usually I'm not looking for the base range. Of course, it's very interesting and it's important to understand the distillery character, where it all begins, and what the distiller or blender wants to deliver to the customers. But at the end, I'm looking for more interesting stuff. I'm looking for unique flavors. I'm looking for to make things interesting and oh, sorry.
You thought that the truck is gonna do?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's falling apart. So yeah.
Yeah. Before he loses a door, I'm gonna move out of the way. That was a scary noise coming from this garbage truck.
So this is where we're going up to the Apex series, where we're not trying to keep things balanced, but letting the casks give their intense flavors work and do their magic. So at the Apex series so far we had 10 batches, where we focused in each one on different interesting casks, very unique casks that we have, some experimental casks that we had not so much from, and it all bottled at cask strength, and I think that's going to be very interesting.
It was very small batches when we started. I think the first one was 1,200 bottles from 5 Chardonnay casks from, like a traditional Chardonnay from the mountains of Jerusalem, from a winery called Castel, and but it's a real Chardonnay, with the lees and everything. So we got them very fresh just after they emptied them. They bottled the wine, and we just left it there for 3 years.
Yeah.
And we bottled it very strong. It was 61 or 62 point something, and eventually it takes it some bottle shock. Bottle rest. It's not only for wines. It's also for whiskey sometimes. And this one was the first one, it was very brave to go with the first, just a white wine whiskey, but it was so good. And now we know that if we're gonna make another one like that, it's gonna be so different.
Yeah.
It could be, even if it's the same winery and the same casks. So this is why we call the batches numbers in the Apex series, because even if we do the same one, it's going to be different. Second one, I think, was rum cask, or something like that. Was 5 casks. I think 4 of them were from Hampton, from Jamaica, and 1 of them was Havana Club, or something like that. We usually don't talk about that, but it was the combination was amazing because of funkiness from one side and the fruitiness and sweetness from the other side. And then, of course, we did some pomegranate wine cask, which was a hit. We had 2 batches of those, totally different from one to the other, but it was a fun thing to see because, as I told you, Joshua, it was all there. The ID, the Israeli DNA, the fruit that we eat so much in Israel, it's a part of our diet, but please let the product be good. And it was a very nice whiskey. So we keep going and trying all kinds of crazy ideas, and something that is really different from our core range.
There's a thing kept on popping up, at least in my head, over this past week, where we're pouring these different Apex series whiskeys, and then of course the Elements red wine. And you've got the Apex fortified red wine, you've got the Elements red wine, you talked about the Chardonnay, and of course you're a kosher distillery, and most people, at least in the States, or I should say most non-Jews, think of kosher wine as either Manischewitz, which is not very delicious, but hey ho, there it is.
I won't use their casks.
They're steel tanks. I'll tell you, I actually like Manischewitz. Don't tell anybody. Anyway, but I'm not a wine person, so but there's a big wine culture in Israel, and again, most people think of either Manischewitz or they think of Israeli wines. If you taste them, they tend to be, if you don't know this word, it's called mavushal, where they basically sort of boil the wine quickly or flash pasteurize it. And to me, that sort of takes the heart and soul out of a wine. But you're using these Israeli wine casks to make amazing whiskeys. So what are we missing from the Israeli wine culture?
So first of all, we have around 3,000-year-old wine culture. The word wine, you can find it almost 100 times in the Bible. So
oh wow,
yeah, and believe me, back then they didn't do any boiling, no mevushal wines whatsoever. By the way, they just found next to Yavne, which is a city I think around 30 minutes southern of Tel Aviv, they found the biggest old winery from Byzantine, which dates for 1,500 years ago, with a production capacity of 2 million liters of wine.
Wow.
And it was crazy. Just think about that. So we have beautiful wines, which the wine culture kind of disappeared during the Ottoman Empire occupation of the land of Israel and our area, and then it came back in the 18th century with the Baron Rothschild bringing his agronome people, and of course some grape varieties to plant.
Yeah.
In Israel, we make wines. The old style of wines we make in Israel are from, I think, international varieties. If you're making a Cabernet Sauvignon in Israel, you need to work different than you work in cold countries, like with whiskey. And sometimes it used to be very kind of Californian style, very round, a bit sweet, and lots of oak. And more we're making the new style of winemakers that are making more of all kinds of Mediterranean grape varieties, from Carignan to Grenache to Syrah, Petit Syrah, and more of those that are more suitable for our kind of climate and terroir. In Israel, actually, you don't find a lot of mevushal wines because we don't need that. even the Orthodox Jews, they don't use a lot of mevushal because they know they can buy a kosher wine from even a religious people that operates their own wineries. I think one of the biggest wineries in Israel, it's an Orthodox Jewish family. It's called Tepperberg. They're doing fabulous wines. We just sourced some of them fortified wines, so casks. So very good wine culture. I know that some of them, when they come here, because they know if for an Orthodox Jew, I think if someone that is not Jewish sells him a wine, this wine has to be mevushal or something like that. So look for very good Israeli wines, sometimes out of the kosher segment, even if they're kosher. Because I know that if you're an American, you don't care about kosher, you won't gonna look at the Manischewitz and the gefilte fish side of the store. But we have very good wines, different terroir. If you like Lebanese wine, sometimes Turkish wines are great, and Greek wines, which are booming all over the world at the moment. But it's Mediterranean country. It's Mediterranean country, and we have some mountains. So those kind of casks, that's what we are using in our whiskeys. And of course, we saw that some people think that kosher whiskey is like mevushal. We don't need it. We distilled. So
Exactly.
So anyway, it's not like that. And fortunately for us, there was no whiskey production in the Bible, so no tons of laws and regulations from the Bible. We just don't work on weekends and Jewish holidays. And when we are sourcing grape-based products, casks like cognac, sherry, port, or red and white wines, or even Pinot de Charenton stuff we talked about. Those has to be kosher, and we can source them. So there's nothing there. For us, it's an added value. We work together with Star K certificate, and those guys they understand whiskey, which is great for us. They don't just bug us for stuff like that. So they understand whiskey, and this is why it's kind of easy for us to be kosher whiskey.
Yeah.
Not a hassle.
When you first...
Wow, I talk a lot, huh?
God, I was going to say that. I said, when we first started this...
It's too much coffee. I need a beer. I need a beer. It's already noon now,
There will be Guinnesses later,
okay,
I promise.
Great.
When you first built the distillery, was there... And I'm backtracking a little bit, but was there a certain style, a certain distillery you wanted to emulate? But with an Israeli twist, or were you, because I know you follow the Scottish guidelines. I understand that's very important to you, and I want to talk about that in just a bit. But with that in mind of aligning yourselves with the Scottish guidelines, was there a distillery you wanted to emulate, and if so, who was that and why?
Well, I don't really want to say names of other distilleries, but we thought about doing some Space ID Scotch-like style. And I think that changed over the 8 years that we are producing to the character that we got now. But at the beginning we designed everything with Dr. Jim Swan to be a Space ID-ish whiskey.
I apologize for my question there. That's better put, that you wanted a particular style. But no matter what, even though you targeted this style, you have your climate and your different climate zones that make a twist on it. So I feel as if you find yourselves in a difficult position where you're looking to target a certain style, but you have the climate in a way working against you, but also in a way working with you to allow you to mature your whiskeys faster. But then again, to work against you, you want a minimum 3 years, and there's other things that you're looking to have as a baseline for what you feel Israeli whiskey could be. So, with this in mind, you mentioned briefly the other day that you're starting talks with the Israeli government to create a category of Israeli whiskey that has a baseline of rules that distilleries should follow. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'll just say that as the Japanese now figure out that they need some rules, some laws for what can be called Japanese whiskey, or some definitions for Japanese whiskey, we will figure this out in few years. And I think we should start thinking about it and start, I won't say defend the Israeli whiskey category from being too wide and too without any definitions for what can be called Israeli whiskey. Right now we don't have a lot of restrictions. We can call almost everything Israeli whiskey, and I think that's wrong for the customer at the end, and I think that's wrong for the to keep the Israeli whiskey in a good quality on the shelf, because if someone will drink some not good Israeli whiskey, it will affect all the Israeli producers.
Like we're speaking about kosher wines.
Yeah, right. That's a very good point.
And that's it.
But what is that? And maybe you don't know the answer to this, but Tomer, I really liked how you brought up the Japanese comparison, where producers are getting together, they're having discussions, they're trying to create guidelines that will hopefully be implemented sometime in 2024. So are you going alone? Are you working with your fellow whiskey producers? As I know, there's Golani, there's Yerushalmi, and I think one more.
There's Pelter.
Yeah.
And there is Shevet, which didn't have
There
any
will
whiskey.
be there will be 3 or 4 more that are on construction right now, or even started distillation, but has no whiskey yet. And we will want to work with everyone. We don't have any competition, let's call it like this. We are all friends, and we need to think about how to build the Israeli whiskey category.
Actually, we're working with the Chamber of Commerce and with lots of government bodies to work with that. For an example, the guys from Pelter was with us 3 weeks ago because they want to enlarge their capacity of distillation, and we were talking about collaboration even with casks, or just to help them understand, because they're doing it with all the fruit alembics, like cognac alembics. So we try to talk to them about the cuts and how to do that. So kind of help them, give them information. So again, like Thomas said, if everyone will do a good job, it's going to be a great Israeli whiskey category, like you see in other countries. And I hope that the rest of the distilleries hop along.
Yeah. I want to switch gears just a little bit. You were telling me during one of our long drives, I think Tomer was sleeping on
No, I'm
his
not. I'm not
American-
sleeping. I'm listening to you guys all the way.
Yes.
You were mentioning, during the 11-day war, and I don't know if that's the proper term, but the 11-day kerfuffle.
Kartoffel.
A short while ago in Israel, you couldn't go to work for a couple of days, and then it was Shabbat, and then there was something else going on, and basically you had your wash fermenting for an extended period of time, and then you ended up distilling that. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I thought that was really...
It was like
of course,
almost 7 days or 6 days?
It was more than 7. It was 8 days
Yeah.
of fermentation, when we usually ferment during midweek for 48 hours, and then during weekends for just a little bit more than 72 hours. And of course, we know that the fermentation time affects the flavors of the whiskey. It produces more congeners and things like that. So it is change. It is different from the new make that we usually have. So I guess in the next 3-4 years we will have some very interesting long fermentation additions.
So you tasted it, and it had some different flavors. Was it?
It was much fruitier.
Yeah.
For some people, it felt like almost rum style.
Oh wow.
Very sweet, very fruity. which is great, but it's not the distillery character that we are looking for.
Okay, and so this was going to be my follow-up question to that.
We are not going to change this, change our fermentation time.
But do you think you would, similar to how you run peated malt for a few weeks out of the year, do you think you would run extended fermentation batches for special editions?
That might be possible. Yeah. I liked what came out of the long fermentation batch, but I think we will do it in the future more.
Just wait for
but
the
in
next
general,
war.
in general, we really like to experiment with everything. So we have some different yeast variations, and we have some different barley variations batches. So we are experimenting all the time with different things, changing all the variables in the production process. So we are experimenting. You should expect in few years some really interesting additions that will come out.
As I told you, we're laughing about that. Maybe we're going to call it Apex Iron Dome or something like that. Under fire, I don't know.
Apex Under Fire.
Apex Under Fire.
Speaking of Apex, this is another thing we discussed. You've got the classic, which is your table whiskey or your session whiskey, or basically everything is built off of that. Mm-hmm. And you've got Elements, which is your balanced line, or your line of balanced whiskeys that are built off of classic, and then your Apex series, which is where you put your fun batches in. But you're expanding that next year to highlight special single casks.
Yeah, the TNT casks.
Exactly. Actually, you came up with that. We actually called it like that.
So actually,
oh, that's awesome.
Actually, every morning coffee, me and Tal, we don't finish the glass of coffee because we just start talking about. Yesterday I tasted this cask and this cask, and we just start sampling casks, and we are finding all the time interesting casks, some very exceptional casks that we want to bottle as really special editions. So the Apex series will get a really brand new, fancy black bottles, mm-hmm. and we will bottle some really exceptional casks that chose especially by me, myself, and the gentleman that's sitting next to you.
We actually picked the first 6 or 7.
Oh wow!
Yeah, just last week. There's going to be another expression, which is going to be a yearly, very short seasonal or something like that. So next year we're going to have a series of beer casks from different types of beers and different micro breweries around Israel. Wow. Maybe double stout, IPA, stuff like that. And a year later on, we'll try to play with different wine terroirs in Israel, or all kinds of stuff like that will go out as a series of 3, 4, 2. I don't know. We'll see about that. It's going to be called the yearly project.
But I think we didn't talk about the Dead Sea edition.
No, we still have 25 minutes.
Yeah, we still have 25 minutes.
All right. So we just launched
1 minute for each percentage of angel share coming out of the Dead Sea.
Yeah. So we just launched the Apex Dead Sea edition, which if this is batch number 10 from the Apex series, yeah. And if in the first 9 batches we focused on different cask types and we let the cask work and give their intense flavors, here we focus on terroir, or on the different climate zones that we have in Israel, which is such a small country.
Tomer, it's a kind of a closure, because the last time we had a podcast, it was the day after we came back from the Dead Sea.
That is very true.
So we were there, and Joshua actually tasted the very young liquid like 2 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
And now we're launching it again, and it's going to be in America in the next few weeks.
That's why it was so important to me to talk about the Dead Sea, you see?
I love it. He's a natural, you know.
Look at that, the segues.
So here we are going to focus on terroir, or on different climate zone that we have in Israel, which in such a small country, we have 5 different climate zones. So we spread all over small warehouses in each climate zone, and we check the differences, we experiment from that, we learn a lot, and we will release some special editions. So the Dead Sea, the Apex Dead Sea is already out, and we'll hit the US in next month, I think.
Yeah, it's so the Dead Sea just for reference here. It's Friday, November 12th, and the Dead Sea just hit our importation warehouse maybe a week ago or so, somewhere around there. So it should start hitting shelves on the West Coast shortly, and then get over to the East Coast within the month or so.
I think that after we launch the first one, we're going to have another one which is going to be with different casks. Tom is going to talk about the casks, but it's going to be from different casks because we have so many different casks there. It's a part of the experiment. And now we are working on some warehousing. One is in the mountains of Jerusalem, which is very dry, and a lot of differences between day and night, even in the summertime. And of course, in the winter, it's cold. And then Sea of Galilee, which is minus 210 meters below sea level, but very humid down there in the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee. Kind of the opposite from the Dead Sea. And of course, we have another one in the desert next to the border with Egypt, which is a totally desert place. Not just was the Dead Sea is a desert because of the Grand Rift Valley, what we call the Syrian-African break, and because of that, there's no rain there because it's so low. But it wasn't supposed to be a desert. It's not in the desert belt of the world. But down south, next to Egypt, next to the Sinai Desert, the Negev Desert is really a desert. So we'll see what's up with there. It's going to be very different from warehouse to warehouse.
So it can rain there, but because it's so low, the water evaporates by the time it gets...
No, the water... Actually, you have mountains before that. If there was no break, the mountains will keep on until they reach the mountains of Jordan. So it's the Jordan Valley. The Jerusalem mountains and the Jordanian mountains were almost one mountain, and then it broke, and it spreads like 2 centimeters every year. The rain clouds in Israel comes from the Mediterranean Sea, and then they fly over the coastal plain, and then when they reach the mountains, they stuck above Jerusalem and get all of the rain in the Jerusalem mountains, and then they're empty when they're reaching the very, very deep Grand Rift Valley.
Got it. Okay. So with the flavors coming out of the whiskey from the Dead Sea, is it heat? Is it air pressure that's affecting the whiskey? Is it the salt in the air that's affecting the whiskey? And I know this was a question that we got many times when we were doing the festival in New Jersey, where people were expecting to be drinking, a really salty whiskey, and it's not salty. I mean, there may be like hints and things like that, just like you would find a hint of salt in an Islay whiskey or something like that. But what's the Dead Sea doing to the whiskey in cask?
Well, in general, it just extract much more flavors from the wood, from the cask. The evaporation rate gives it much more bolder style, and the flavors appears to be much more stronger than in other places. The mouth texture is really thick. You can almost chew it in your mouth, and I think that bolts all the flavors, hide a little bit of the distillery character because of the wood flavors that came out from the cask, of the other cask flavors. And that makes it really different, interesting, and unusual.
That's a good point. Tasting it, the oak has a good amount of influence on it, and while tasting it, it made me think that it may be something that bourbon lovers would really like, because there's a lot of wood-driven flavor going on there.
And a lot of bourbon casks.
We had a lot of bourbon cask there, and
Yeah.
a lot of STR cask, which at the beginning gives you a lot of it's not winey flavors because we shave out almost all of the wine that's soaked into the wood, but it gives some winey spiciness at the beginning. But the longer the fermentation continues, the more oak flavors that you get. So at the Dead Sea, it's even more intense. It's even more strong. So you get a lot of wood flavors, oak flavors from the STR casks also.
Is there a cask type you'd say no to?
Actually, I wasn't so excited about trying tequila cask, or we even have our own variation of oak aged gin. So we don't throw the cask. We try to put whiskey inside those casks, and I don't like casks that affect too much on the character of the whiskey. So I don't think it will be released sometime, but maybe, I don't know.
But generally, no, we don't. We will say yes to any cask. We'll try, and maybe if we don't like it, we either blend it to another one or just drink it. You know us.
I don't like it, but I'm going to drink it
I'm
anyway.
going to drink it anyway. I'm not going to. Yeah, it's, we grew up in houses that you don't throw bread, so we don't throw whiskey.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
No, but in basic, we want to experiment in everything. We will say no only after the maturation, when we will taste it and decide not or yes, not to bottle it.
Well, this is the beautiful thing about being a small producer, where you small and independently owned producer, you've got the freedom to play around and do what you want with flavor, and you've created an environment for fans of your distillery to expect strange things, to expect unusual things, and that is a very cool place to be as a New World producer.
Well, that's even makes the 4 core range whiskeys more important, because we still have the distillery character, but yes, we will release, and we want to release, and that's what the Apex Series for, some interesting stuff to intrigue even whiskey geeks or all whiskey drinkers.
For me, I think when we look at the tastings we had and masterclasses and stuff like that, the perfect customer is the one that buys classic and then, I don't know, fortified red wine cask or a cognac Apex. And this is crazy because they're so different. You're going to feel the distillery character, but he wants this one for this occasion and the other one for the different occasion. Mm-hmm. It's a very ugly state here, with, where you live in. It's very ugly.
Right? There's nothing appealing about it.
No green, nothing. No colors. It's so beautiful.
Joshua, how long are your podcasts?
17 hours.
All right. Because that became long.
Yeah. There's always a question that I like to get us out on, but I did want to ask really quickly. Tal, you had mentioned before you're in 27 export markets now.
Yes.
And if you took COVID out of the equation, what do you find? Because you're the vice president of international sales, so this is always on your mind, I imagine. What are the challenges that you face if you took COVID out of the equation? Is it your New World producer? Is it non-age stated? What?
It's, I think, a New World, but still very untraditional country to make whiskey. And like Israel, it's really, you guys are making whiskey. And so this is the first thing. A non-age statement, I think, until now, it wasn't that much of a problem because we tend to appeal to the more educated whiskey drinkers. So they know about hot climate countries, and I think Kavalan paved the way for all of us. Kavalan and Amrut. So it's kind of easier to do that, and more big Scottish names are, they have NAS as well. But maybe we don't suffer a lot from all kinds of problems because we're from Israel. Like wines are suffering sometimes because we appeal to a different kind of crowd. We did had some problems in Scandinavia after the short fight with Gaza. But I think that you should convince them first that we actually can make whiskey.
Yeah.
And then they need to taste it. And then I think that it's kind of easier to do that. It's very hard for me to say because we started during COVID. So
Yeah, right.
So there's no world for me before COVID. Only then it was very hard to try to convince people to sell young single malt and other whiskey because the sales pitch is much longer. But now when we have whiskey and we are doing a good job and we're winning prizes and we won the Craft Producer of the Year by the World Whiskey Awards, Icons of Whiskey, and some other, even Kosher Fest, best in something.
Yeah, best in show.
So it's kind of easier to start the ball rolling and then just help and target and help those our partners and importers around the world to sell.
Yeah. So let's get to my final question.
Woo, final one.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
What?
He fell asleep. Every time I'm picking the microphone, he falls asleep.
So, I think you set it up perfectly for me, Tal. You've got all of these awards. You've got global acclaim. You've got people. I won't necessarily mention names, but there was someone, a friend within the industry, who after a show said, there were two things I loved from this show: a 60-year-old Springbank and the 3-year-old Dead Sea. And so it seems as if everything is looking up for Milk and Honey. There's only room for growth, and I know that you're hopefully going to be expanding your production a little bit. What's in store for the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? What has you excited as you move toward the future?
So I think first of all, really no more lockdowns, please. I think go get vaccinated or whatever. Don't just stay at home. I don't know, but really, it's they just closed Holland for us, and if the world gonna go back to normality, I think that it's going to be easier to do our job because we never had a normal year since we have whiskey. So for us, we think fast and we produce fast, and this is why this year we're going to have a lot more bottles. So I think that Liquid on Lips, try our whiskey, we're going to be there anywhere we can, and we're going to try to win some more medals. But I think that eventually for me, medals is a tool, but when a person in, I don't know where, in Connecticut.
Yeah, we just entered Scotland.
Yeah, from Hebron to Scotland in half an hour.
Yeah, easy breezy.
So for me, just another person in a whiskey tasting in a store in a place that I don't remember his name left later on tells me that he wants my whiskey, he loves my whiskey, it's a surprise for him. It's the best medal.
Yeah, right.
So we continue to get some more Apex, some more me. We are thinking about expanding the core range in about 1 year. Or even less, if it's going to be okay with us. We'll try the casks again, and just keep on running. This is what we like.
Beautiful. Tomer?
Nothing to add.
He fell asleep. He didn't hear the question.
I'll just continue
What's
producing.
your plans for next year? Yeah.
The plans is to continue produce the best single malt we can produce, and just let you taste it, and I hope you will like it.
I can't think of a better way to end that.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, thank you both. Really appreciate your time and letting me take you all around the beautiful northeast of the United States of America.
It is beautiful. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
Cheers. Sincere thanks to Tal and Tomer for coming out and for letting me create a week that I think was very successful for M&H and their brand within the area. One thing I'll tell you, Jason, I'll tell the listeners as well. Personally, I think M&H lives in a very unusual pocket of the whiskey world. They themselves say, first and foremost, we make single malt whiskey. Secondly, we're world single malt whiskey, and we want to be recognized as such. Thirdly, we're located in Tel Aviv. Fourthly, oh yes, also we're kosher, right? They don't lead with kosher, but in some areas, I think they feel they need to, right? Because they need to sort of they're representing Israel, and they're representing kosher to a kosher-keeping community in a way that no one has done before or has been able to do before, specifically through their element sherry, right? There's never been a sherry or a kosher-certified sherry whiskey before. And so building that week was a combination of focusing on events like Kosher Fest, focusing on events, specifically to Jewish consumers, but then also what the real focus is, we're whiskey makers. That's it. We're whiskey makers out there to make the best whiskey we can make. And so we kind of had to live in a series of worlds, and I created a week that hopefully did that.
I'm so glad you bring this up right now. First of all, just like you said, thanks to Tal and Tomer, listen to those chaps, so much fun. All the way through lockdown, seeing them on Zooms, seeing them as part of Whiskey Show in London and being on with them was so wonderful. They're such good guys. I was going to say I'm going to blow a little smoke here, but I'm really not.
Okay.
But I'm going to give you your due, D-U-E.
Oh, look at you.
Your due.
I thought you were going to give me my due. Yeah, okay.
You've already got that in spades. But you just said this a second ago. M&H are single malt producers. And this year you've been running an Impex Drinks With series, where the first episode focused on Scotch was fantastic, and I highly recommend it. In the second episode, you had a world single malt episode with Gal from M&H,
Tal Chotiner,
who I hadn't heard before. And so I loved hearing from him for the very first time, but then Spirit of Yorkshire were on there and Penderyn were on there. I wanted to take a moment in the podcast to tell our listeners, if you like what we do here, please go to YouTube, please go to Facebook, really go to YouTube, and look up the Impex Drinks With series. Episode 1 and Episode 2 are out of this world, and Episode 3, an independent bottler focus, happens the day this episode drops.
Yes, it does.
But again, you could go see that. It'll be available on YouTube as well. But I really, really mean it, and I've texted you privately at the end of both Episode 1 and Episode 2. They are master classes in their topic. And serious kudos to you. Wonderful guests, knowledgeable guests. And given the M&H focus of this episode, Gal did a tremendous job in Episode 2, saying more about M&H as well. So all of that, especially with the holidays coming up, a little bit of time, a little bit of downtime for people, pour a dram. Call up the Drinks With, the Impex Drinks With series, and have some fun. Learn a ton.
Let me shed a little bit of that praise, because the idea behind this one is different from the other ones I did, where the other ones I had a series of questions that I wanted to pose, and then toward the end, if we had gotten, if we had the chance to get to a listener question, then we would, attend to that. Where in this series, I'm asking an opening question, but we've been inviting people to present questions beforehand. right? You can send questions into social@impactsbev.com, I think it is. And so people sent questions in beforehand, and then we'd watch the comments as they were coming in with people asking questions. And while I feel as if I did a good job moderating, and I thank you for saying as such, I would say that it's really, and thanks to the viewers, both on YouTube and on Facebook, for submitting really good questions. And it was obvious they were actively listening to the presenters and posing questions based on what the presenter was discussing. And I had a cohort, Jeanette with Impacts, was sending me texts every now and again. She's saying, you really have to check out Travis Williams' question, right? check out so-and-so's question. And she was a big help. And so while I do thank you for the praise, if it weren't for the viewers, if it weren't for Jeanette, I don't think I would have been able to moderate it as well as I did. So, and of course, the
takes a
panelists,
village,
right? So,
yeah, good. Yeah, well worth people's time. So, thanks to Tal and Toma for being here today, covering this wonderful, wonderful stuff. Good job driving safely while conducting an interview in the pissing rain. and yeah, definitely check out the Impacts.
Cheers.
Drinks with stuff.
Perfect. So normally, Jason, you and I would do news here, but it's really the end of the year. And the only thing that we'll say
it is,
from a news standpoint, is next week we will have the last of our Extra Extra, It's All About Whiskey episode for the season. And so we'll skip January 5 and return with season 3 of Extra Extra on, what is that, the 29th, January 29th? Do I have that right?
If we, oh gosh, yeah, gosh.
Skip the 5th.
If we skip the 5th,
5 plus 14.
Back.
That's the 19th, January 19th. Yeah. So we'll return with season 3 of Extra Extra, It's All About Whiskey. But then on December 29, we'll have our final episode of the year. It's not our final episode of season 5, but our final episode of the year, and it's our annual year in review. What do we do, Jason, on our year in review?
A bunch of things. We look back at the year that has been. We invariably discuss a favourite One Nation Under Whiskey episode, which is often 6 long, 12 long. We do a terrible job of picking a favourite. We pick our favourite Single Cask Nation release of the year, and we pick our favourite non-Single Cask Nation pick of the year. Often whiskey focused, but not necessarily.
Very true.
And then along the way, we throw in a whole bunch of honourable mentions. Sometimes we category hop. Really, we just do whatever the hell we want as we're drinking together on a Sunday afternoon towards the end of December.
Yep. It sounds like the best Sunday ever.
I fucking love that. Do you know what's funny about picking a favourite episode of the year? That one that we record is my favourite of the year. Because we look back on everything we've done, everything we've achieved, everything we've tasted. Like it's brilliant. It's so much fun.
It's reminiscing, and reminiscing can be so much fun. Always is.
Did we go over 3 hours on last year's episode?
Are you saying we have to go over 6 on this?
I am not. I am just thinking how much time my wife is going to allot for the recording of it. And I'm thinking I should have a baked mac and cheese ready to go straight into the oven for the close of that recording.
That sounds delicious.
Oh, yeah. With some balsamic Brussels sprouts, roasted Brussels sprouts on the side.
Oh, interesting.
That's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Anyway. So, yeah, that was lovely. You covered the gamut there. While we're here talking about these things, obviously, and I know we're still in the unofficial news segment here, but here's some news for you. No email question in today's episode. We are still collecting email questions for the mid-February. I think we agreed February 9 this 2022
Sure.
will be this mailbag episode. You have until January 30 to get your questions into us, and we've opened the doors. Ask us anything you want, anything that's on your mind, anything you've wondered. How have those two jamokes kept wives for as many years as they have? What's their secret? Well, ask the question. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of that. But send a question to questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com.
Mm-hmm.
No Ian Whiskey.
Ever.
Or you could send a question to info@singlecastnation.com. That account is checked. And we're collecting them. We have questions ready to go for the mailbag episode. It's been wonderful seeing them coming in. And every time we drop an episode with this reminder, for the next few days, that's when the questions come in. And then it kind of goes quiet again. Then we make the reminder and a few more come in. So please, if you've thought about sending in one but you haven't done so yet, please go ahead and do that. We'd love to hear from you.
The other thing that I'd like to say before we go into doing the thing that we've been wanting to do on Wax, speaking of reminders, is I'm going to ask people for a belated Hanukkah gift.
Shameless.
We would love for you to go to Apple iTunes and give us a rating if you wouldn't mind. 5 stars would be lovely. 4 are more than acceptable. Just give us a rate. Even if you want to pop in some nice words, we would absolutely love it. If you enjoy if you enjoy this podcast, showing your appreciation by way of giving us 4 or 5 stars would be lovely. If you could say some nice things, that would be lovely too. We're finding out more and more that people are coming to this podcast because of how it's rated. And so far it's rated pretty well, but the more ratings you get, the more available Apple seems to make it or rank it within the searches.
It's an algorithm.
Right.
It's an algorithm.
It's an algorithm, and I'd love for you to help us get into rhythm. And so go to Apple and say some nice things and rate us, please. We would absolutely love that.
While we're on the subject of algorithms, and I know that some people take book recommendations from our podcast, I had a book recommended to me by a good friend and listener, Bert Bumgardner. And he recommended Weapons of Math Destruction.
Oh, interesting.
And it's this fascinating dive into the algorithms that are deciding a lot of things for human beings. It's not entirely clear how they're coming to their conclusions, why they're coming to their conclusions. But as far as confirmation bias goes, the conclusions that they come to are held and administered without concern or complaint.
Wow.
And it's written by a PhD mathematician who has been in the education realm, the private sector. It's a fascinating read, absolutely fascinating. I read it in a single day. It is well worth your time if that's your style. And so, once again, Weapons of Math Destruction.
I love it. There's a book that I return to every now and again. I forget the name of the author. I have it right in my room. It's simply called Zero. And it's basically about the impact that the number 0 has had on society. And it's there's much more to it as well, but I love how math can be interweaved into our lives, and so I love the sound of this. Weapons of Math Destruction. I'm in.
That's it. As we do have the little truncated news segment here, I'm just going to drop a breadcrumb because I do want to come back to it in the year in review.
Okay.
But our hashtag Giving Tuesday event this year, which we haven't circled back to on the podcast.
That's true.
I wanted to really dive into it in the year in review episode, but I wanted to leave this little breadcrumb so that we can return to that in one more episode.
The only thing I'll tack on to that is you praised me for the Drinks With series.
Oh,
We can only praise those that gave during the Giving Tuesday.
oh.
Right. Yeah. That is something that we will need to talk about in the year in review episode. So I'm excited. Thank you for dropping that breadcrumb. Are you ready to do the thing that we said we were going to do?
As long as it's a thing that we agreed to before we hit the record button.
So I'm going to open mine. Oh, that's not the sound a cork makes. What? That's the sound
Clitter
a
clatter. Clitter clatter.
Vino seal makes.
It is.
Glug, 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 glug. So, Jason, you and I, and we'll say this to the listeners, you, dear listener, Jason and I have just poured a little bit of the Single Cask Nation, what we've been calling the Wolf Island bottling. So this is an unusual bottling that you and I did where, while it does say Single Cask Nation on it, you and I married 6 casks together. Ages were between 7 and 9 years old. All first fill bourbon. 5 were unpeated. The 6th cask was peated. And this was a marriage of casks we'd been working on for some time to perfect, to get it exactly where we wanted it to be. 48.8% alcohol, not cask strength. We normally do cask strength, but again, this was a project we were working on, and we wanted to get it to the ABV that we thought would have it drinking at its best. And we didn't know what to do with it. And then we connected with our friends at the Water of Life film, Greg, Trevor, Alphonse, Fiona, and the whole, group over there.
Yeah, the whole gang.
And so we did a single cask bottling with them. That was their 17-year-old Stones of Stenness. It was a sherry cask whiskey from Orkney. And we couldn't say the distillery name for that one. And here we are running into a similar situation, not being able to disclose the distillery name. However, this was 1,600 bottles that have been started hitting store shelves, and it's been turning heads left and right. But at the same time, we've been getting questions from people wanting to know, well, what's it like? Am I going to like it? Blah, blah, blah. And so we thought, why not give it a review on the podcast? So here we are.
Yeah, we mentioned it a couple of episodes again where, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, as an industry podcast, we were pretty open and transparent about our internal name of Wolf Island not appearing anywhere on the label. And in fact, it's a sheep standing next to a boom mic on the label. And so it's the SCN Wolf collaboration, unnamed island.
Just rolls right off the tongue. Yep.
Right. Quaffable drinker. And, you can see it from where you're sitting, Joshua, but I'm halfway through this bottle. Mm-hmm. And the last time we talked about this on the episode, as you show me your half full bottle, the last time we talked about this on One Nation Under Whiskey, neither one of us had taken receipt of the bottles that had come into the United States for general release, for retail release. And now we have them. Like you, I've been taking the questions. I know Elijah's been fielding the questions. What's it like? What's going on in it? The one thing we have said along the way, damn if it's not a pop your Vino seal on Friday and recycle the bottle on a Monday. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a second here. And then just the other night, Elijah, we've talked about his series, Banter About the Barrel. He spoke with Greg Swartz about the collaboration on Instagram Live.
Yep.
So I recommend heading over to Instagram, look up Single Cask Nation, see the Instagram Live there. Well worth seeing more.
Oh, yeah. I have to do that myself. I had an event that evening. I couldn't watch it live, so I've got to go
It was
back
well
and check
done.
it out.
Lovely conversation between the two of them. Yeah, real easy. So here we are. So let's get whiskey.
So let me
That was my Olivia Newton-John, by the way. Let's get physical. Let's get whiskey.
Let's get whiskey. Whiskey. Let's get whiskey.
I've got my leg warmers on.
Oof.
And I've got my headband on.
Oof.
So, yeah, I'm going to get whiskey.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Fans of Greece will love that one. Anyway, let me. As you're nosing this one, let me just remind people. One of the questions that I had been fielding, that I know, Jason, you have been fielding, and of course Elijah has been fielding, and I only say the three of us because this is a U.S. release. This didn't make it outside of the U.S., so Jess really hasn't been fielding the questions. The question is, can't you give me just a little hint? Come on. And to which we say, no, the contract stipulates we can't even be cheeky. We can't do anything. And then there are some people that'll say, okay, that's and then some people say, okay, but which Isla distillery is it? And I said, no, it's not Isla, it's an island, even though Isla is an island. Isla is its own region, and we would, attribute it as such. And then they say, when they hear peated and unpeated, they say, "All right, thanks for telling me. I'll let all my friends know it's Aaron, or I'll let all my friends know it's Tobermory, or I'll let all And the fact of the matter is, a lot of these island distilleries are producing both peated and unpeated spirit. It's not just those two, right? There's distilleries on Orkney that are doing that. Anyway, we can't say anything. But what we can do is tell you our notes, both on the nose and on the palate. So while I've been talking there, Jason, what are you getting on the nose with this one?
There's this wonderful, bright fruitiness, almost peach-like. You could extend it into apricots, into pears, maybe extend it into a nice, fresh, crisp apple.
Yeah.
But then there's an earthiness behind that. There's an earthiness that grounds the fruit. And it's not a medicinal earthiness.
No.
I don't think it's coming from a medicinal peat quality. But it is earthy. It's not wood smoke. It's not a wood frame around another series of qualities. It is connecting to, I'm going to use the same word again, the earth.
Yeah.
And I love that about it.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about this whiskey where I think if people didn't know the details of this whiskey, they would never guess that there's actually peated whiskey in here that, almost 17-ish%, whatever 1/6 is of the overall makeup is peated whiskey. You wouldn't get that because it is so bright and fresh and fruity. And I love what you said about the apple. I get Golden Delicious apple.
Right.
I also oddly get this sort of grape must note on there, but I think it's I think maybe it's less grape must and more dunnage, like a warehouse note. So maybe back to that earthy quality that you're talking about. And there's also on the nose there's a salinity to it. It just
Agreed.
Delicate salinity. It doesn't smell coastal. This is, even though it's an island distillery, it doesn't necessarily smell coastal like you think a Kalila smells coastal or a Lagavulin can smell coastal. It's a salinity. It is a very separate kind of note. I see you taking a sip.
I am, because I'm looking at it in my glass each time I bring it up to my nose, and I'm looking at how oily it is. I'm looking at these extended legs on the side of the glass, and I'm thinking, as I would hope any consumer would think, I really want to put that on my tongue. I want to see if that feels as oily, as viscous as it looks. And I think the good news is it definitely does feel rich unctuous, mouth coating, mouth filling.
I was telling you this a bit earlier, but I want to reiterate this for our listeners. I was doing an event, a local event here in Connecticut, and just a private event, but it was specifically a single cask nation one. And I brought 4 or 5 bottles, somewhere around there, and the 18 or so other people, somewhere between 14 and 18, I've stopped counting. Anyway, all brought their own single cask nation bottling. And this was the first one that was poured. And among them was...
Makes good sense.
Right? Among them was 46-year-old Invergordon and Our Laughing Frog and, all sorts of heavy whiskeys and brighter whiskey. Anyway, this led the charge. And by the end of the night, there was a good portion of those people who had said, that was my favorite whiskey of the night. That never happens to a first whiskey. That never happens.
You're exactly correct. Exactly correct. It's like leaving a meal and being like, do you remember the amuse-bouche that the chef sent out? That was my favorite thing of the night. My favorite. But I'm going to say something that I haven't thought through. And it might work and it might not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Controversial. But normally I'm guilty of the other problem. Here's the thing.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
You and I run Single Cask Nation. You and I sell and drink cask strength whiskey constantly. And we love it, and we're always pushing the envelope, and we've done the 67.6% 6-year-old Ben Nevis. We've done the 65.1% Beanley. We think they can be consumed at that strength straight from bottle, thoroughly enjoyed.
Yep.
There's something about sitting down and just making repeated pours of a 48.8 that is wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's the type of thing that makes me worry about myself, where I don't really feel like I'm consuming alcohol when the strength of a whiskey is in the 40s. And I've said it many times on the podcast, huge fan of Compass Box Glasgow Blend, 43% alcohol, can drink that like water.
Yeah.
Right? This at 48.8 still brings texture, still brings presence, still brings flavour. But at only 48.8, I don't feel bad about pouring this twice, pouring this 3 times. Now I'm starting to speak too, honestly.
Once, twice, 3 times a whiskey. Listen, I agree with everything that you said there, and I don't think you should feel bad for saying it. I think there was a time in anybody's whiskey journey where you start at 40. You go to 43, 46, what's that going to do?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And really what you're doing is you're training your tongue. You're training your palate for big pants. And I almost said big boy pants, but I want to be inclusive.
Yeah.
Big person pants.
You have to be. Thank you. Appreciate your edit.
And you get to this point where it's, cast strength or go home, while understanding that there are other whiskeys at 46% and they're perfectly fine, but your palate evolves so much where that's just easy. Right? And
absolutely.
And I don't know if we've spoken this aloud to one another, but I love the idea of creating a whiskey that is easy for people, but is also a slightly higher ABV than 46%, so that it's a nod to the people who are like you and me, who typically drink cask strength, to say, we see your 46% and we raise you, right? We're just sort of throwing them a bone a little bit to say, this is going to drink easy, but it's got a bit more kick for you. And the fact of the matter is, does this have a bit of kick? Has a little spice on the tongue, which is nice.
100%. And I was about to ask you this exact question
Okay.
about the spice on the tongue.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, where do you find the first fill bourbon cask maturation in this whiskey? Because for me, that little bit of spice that runs down the middle of the tongue is speaking to that fresh ginger, that bit of cinnamon from an active first fill bourbon cask. And instead of us diluting that out of it, we've brought it to 48.8, where it can still resonate, it can still tingle, it can still be pleasant, but it's still there, most importantly.
Yeah, for me, the nutmeg spice is there for sure, but for me, the first fill bourbon, there's just some toasted coconut going on there, which I really like. It's in the finish for me.
Interesting.
But I think about this part too. You and I have casks that we filled with this distillery. We filled casks with a few different distilleries, right? And some first fill, some second fill. And it's interesting, the second fill stock that we have with them isn't ready yet. The first fill stock that we have most definitely is. And with this stuff that's only 7 to 9 years old, there's not even a hint of new makiness going on here.
Oh, no.
Right? And like, it was a long-winded way of saying what I'm getting from the first fill bourbon is the fact that at 7 to 9 years of age, you're not getting new makiness. You're getting a fully realized whiskey here with depth and dimension. And if you don't want to pay attention to the depth or dimension, you can just enjoy it as a delicious whiskey that is bringing that first fill bourbon wood to the fore while keeping the natural salinity and apple-like fruitiness from the spirit along with it.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. Yep. No arguments from me. I had a friend come by and we actually drank this out on the back deck, and it was a slightly warmer late fall day, but he had said, this is a summer sipper. This is one sitting out back of your house, out front of your house, somewhere near your house, later in a summer's day, the temperature's dropping, the sun is slowly setting. This would just round out your day. And I thought the fact that he was able to say that on a unseasonably warm late fall day speaks to those fruit components.
Yeah.
To how bright it can be, but how warming it can be, and just satisfying.
And back to the word that you kept on using when you first started nosing this. There's an earthiness to this. There's earth. There's some. While yes, it's bright and it's summery, there's also an anchor there. And if you want to focus on that, right? This is almost like the 3-season room in someone's house, right? It's good for a bunch of seasons, not just summer. And it's doing a lot. And for what I think the list price is $85 on this, is just a solid drinker, something to share for the holidays, man.
As you and I had been discussing on, it might have been a previous extra or a One Nation Under Whiskey. I think it was an extra. It's about the gift giving episode. There's a dram that you want to reach for when people first come into your house.
Yeah.
You want to welcome them to your house. You don't want to blow away their palate. You want to just warm up their palate. Give them something that will make them go, what is this? Could I have another one? This is that. This is that dram.
Yeah.
You pour this for somebody walking in your house. They feel welcomed. They feel warmed. And hell, have another one, right? And you mentioned the price a second ago, and that's why I started riffing in this direction. $85, $90 a bottle at 48.8. Have a couple.
Yeah.
Get into the swing of things.
Yeah. Right. And this was the reason why I led that local tasting with this bottling. It's the perfect introduction. It's
Exactly.
It's the welcome dram. Like, I was welcoming these people into someone else's house, but, still, I was welcoming.
It is the pandemic. You don't want to welcome them into your own house.
Well, I'll tell you, this was a nice thing about this tasting that I loved. So, as you know, I'm triple vaccinated. You're going to be getting your booster next week. The rule in the house was everybody had to be vaccinated and everybody had to have a negative at-home test before they can come. And you know what? No one said anything. Said, I respect that. You're welcoming me into
Seems
your
fair.
house. I'll follow your rules. And that's awesome. And that,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get political here, but regardless of what side of the fence you're on, if you're going to someone's house, you respect their rules. And if the rule is X, you follow X. And I really like that. And everybody complied, and it was a great night.
You said it earlier about Tal and Tomer. Triple vaccinated.
Yeah.
Came into the United States and did a little tour around the United States. Like,
Couldn't have done it without
we're
that.
going to be
right.
We're going to be living in a COVID world going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep ourselves safe and those around us safe. And let's see if we can keep traveling back to other countries and go share drams in foreign climes together.
Yep. Jason.
Cheers to that, Joshua.
Yeah, cheers to that one. It doesn't. Hold on, let's try it. How come you couldn't do that?
Oh.
Because
You've got a base.
I have a base. You know what glass I have, Jason? I have the glass that Travis William had gifted, and it's my one half to a broken heart.
I've got my Joshua Broken Heart glass right beside me. I only pull it out on the most special of occasions, potentially a year in review episode.
Oh, interesting. I thought you just wanted to break my heart.
Early and often, I think, is the answer to that.
So listen, Jason, I think it's high time we let our listeners go. I thank you, as always, for being my partner in crime, not just for the podcast, but since the very beginning. A co-blogger, a co-business starter and founder and owner, my best buddy, all the stuff. Thank you. Thanks to Tal and Tomer.
Thank you.
For spending a week in the United States and for risking life and limb to be interviewed during a pissing down storm in New England. And thanks as always to our listeners. We wouldn't have a podcast without you. Well, I guess we would. We just enjoy talking to ourselves, talking to one another.
We would, but we love having you all tune in. It makes it that even more special, so thank you.
So we'll see you soon for an extra, then our year in review, then we'll take a break on the extra, and then we return. So anyway, enough talking, Jason. Let us bid one another adieu.
Chin chin.
2 chins. God, your clang is terrible, Jason.
I'm a man of a certain age. My clang is what my clang is.
Ain't no clang but a chicken clang. Oh, that's terrible. It's terrible. Stop it. Stop it. All right, speaking of stopping it.
Can you hurry up and welcome us so that I can ask you a question about a movie?
Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I am joined today, and as always, by my literary expert and scholar. You were just talking about James Carver and Jim.
Well done. Well done. Those have been perfectly butchered. Well done. Well done. Raymond Carver and John Cheever.
And Kilgore
we were just
Trout.
discussing before we hit. And Kill Bill?
Kilgore Trout. Is this thing on? What's happening? What are you doing, Jason?
You can't hear that out my window?
No.
Okay, that makes me feel better then, because I can hear it really loud. It sounds like somebody riding a washing machine up a hill.
Should I start us over again? I think so.
I think it's perfect so far.